Breaking news mga kabayan, Maritime Expert ng Pilipinas, Amerika at United Kingdom hindi pinalagpas ang kasinungalingan ng mga salita ng China sa Manila Dialogue sa South China Sea West Philippine Sea 2025. Ang gusto ng China manahimik ang Pilipinas, huwag magdala ng media sa tuwing merong operasyon ang Philippine Coast Guard at BFAR sa West Philippine Sea at huwag daw nating ipakita sa mundo ang mga ginagawa nitong panghaharas sa mga Pilipino sa mismong exclusive economic zone natin. Gusto ng China na pagkasunduan na lang kung ano ang mapagkasunduan, kung ano ang papabor sa kanila. Pero hindi ito tama dahil meron tayong international na batas. Sundin ng China ang nakasaad dito. Ang 2016 Arbitral Award ay isa na dito. Hinatulan na ng tribunal kung sino ang may karapatan at nagmamay-ari ng mga maritime features sa West Philippine Sea. Hindi pwedeng daanin ng China sa purasahan at palakasan para makuha ang buong West Philippine Sea. Mga eksperto na mismo ang nagsabi, mali ang sobra-sobrang pag-aangkin ng China. Hindi ito nagkataon lang. Ito ay totoo na dapat tanggapin nila na ang West Philippine Sea ay para sa mga Pilipino, hindi sa Chino.
South China Sea International Conference in Vietnam also just earlier this week, that the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines is a special one. It's not like there's no exclusive economic zone in the world like the exclusive economic zone of the Philippines, because it is the location of more than 100 features that are the subject of sovereignty claims of foreign states. So you can just imagine that the EEZ of the Philippines is dotted by these maritime features that are being claimed by several states. And so the arbitral award explained that not all of these maritime features can be the subject of sovereignty claims, because some of these features or several of these features are actually low tide elevations. And so therefore, the waters of these low tide elevations, if they're within 200 nautical miles of the Philippine archipelagic baselines, the waters form part of the EEZ of the Philippines, and the submerged land area forms part of the continental shelf of the Philippines. So let's take, for example, Mischief Reef. Mischief Reef is just 125 nautical miles from the archipelagic baselines of the Philippines. It's a low tide elevation. And so therefore, the waters of Mischief Reef form part of the EEZ of the Philippines, and the submerged land area of Mischief Reef forms part of the continental shelf of the Philippines. And so therefore, the waters surrounding the Mischief Reef, since it's the EEZ waters of the Philippines, freedom of navigation applies to those waters. The thing about Mischief Reef is that there's an artificial island there now, about 550 hectares in size, but low tide elevations under international law cannot be the subject of sovereignty claims. So all of the low tide elevations within the EEZ of the Philippines form part of the EEZ of the Philippines, right? So thank you for that, and I would just like to connect this to the question about how can we see each other eye to eye. All of this can be resolved if we trust international law and the institutions that international law have created. If we have sovereignty issues, why don't we trust an international judicial body to resolve our sovereignty disputes? Why don't we trust it? With respect to the maritime dispute, it has been resolved already by an arbitral tribunal that was constituted under UNCLOS, to which both China and the Philippines are state parties. No more maritime dispute. That entire area is the EEZ of the Philippines, subject to the territorial sea of these small features. So I hope China can consider. I took note, of course, of what Dr. Sophie said about let's just agree on what we can agree on, right? But let's also have trust in the institutions of international law to resolve our disputes. And I end with that. Thank you so much.
China signed UNCLOS in 1996. It signed the Declaration on the Conduct of Parties in the South China Sea in 2002. The DOC is a very simple document. It's only got 5 articles in it. China violates 3 of them repeatedly. One is it denies the freedom of navigation to ships operating legally on the high seas within the South China Sea. 2 is it uses the threat and use of force. This is prohibited in the DOC, but it is what else do you call water cannoning and ramming and swarming? All of those are the use of force and the threat of the use of force, and it has failed to exercise restraint. Look, I made this analogy in Vietnam, I'll make it again. I live in Atherton, California, which is a place full of mansions. I have a very small 2-bedroom rental that apparently I can afford with all the CIA money I'm supposed to get. If one of my large neighbors in their mansions begins to move their wall and begins to encroach on my yard, and I can no longer get into large parts of my yard, And then they put large security guards there who push me around and beat me up whenever I try to go out to do my gardening. And then they say, well, you know, why are you causing trouble? Why are you causing trouble trying to go to the place that you went to for generations in your family, and now suddenly you want to go there, but we've taken that now. And by the way, why did you let your wife take a video of it and put it on YouTube? Why are you provoking us? That's the situation of the Philippines today. China has appropriated things that did not used to have and is now blaming the Philippines for provoking it because it took pictures. And I'm sorry, but that is not an acceptable or responsible use of the power that China has, and that is the core of the problem. And the way I think of this, let's take, for example, what happened August 11th. We saw a collision between a PLA Navy ship and a China Coast Guard ship. But we don't often talk about why that happened. The ship that was in the closest proximity, in fact, extremely close to the bow of both ships, was a 44-meter Philippine Coast Guard ship, which was being pursued by both ships and came dangerously close to being rammed, right? So we had a 7,500-ton guided missile destroyer pursuing a 350-ton Coast Guard ship, along with a large China Coast Guard ship. Why was that happening? Why was there a gray hull, a Navy destroyer, involved in this at all? It's because that Philippine Coast Guard ship was in a place that until about 18 months ago, Philippine Coast Guard ships went all the time. That is near Scarborough Shoal, maybe about 10 nautical miles away. The reason there was a Navy destroyer all of a sudden getting involved, which had previously not really been experienced, was because this was sort of the laying down of the law for this new regime that was going to say, you can't come here anymore. It was a change in the status quo that we have been tracking at Sea Light about a 30 nautical mile exclusion zone being enforced around Scarborough Shoal since about May of 2024. This one ship, this one Philippine Coast Guard ship, was inside that exclusion zone, and that was what drew out the destroyer. So we are seeing an aggressive change to the status quo around Scarborough Shoal. We have seen an aggressive change to the status quo at Sabina Shoal. We are seeing a maritime expansion, and we're seeing it happen in the gray zone. So what is, now let's talk about cross-regional cooperation. How long are we going to experience maritime expansion in the South China Sea or in East Asia generally? Until, in the estimation of the People's Republic of China, the costs of expansion outweigh the benefits. Clearly, they are not there at this point. The Philippines has tried two innovations to try to, to nibble away at this cost-benefit calculation. One, of course, was the arbitral case that they brought in 2013 and which they won in 2016. And of course, the second has been this transparency project. Having one country do these things, in Beijing's estimation, clearly has not been enough to cause it to say that the costs outweigh the benefits. This is where cross-regional coordination, cooperation is not just timely, it is overdue. At some point, there needs to be enough cooperation so that Beijing concludes that this expansionist project needs to end. And I'll stop there for now. Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much.
Laban Pinas.